Okay, Mike. So before we took a break, we spoke a lot about the crisis in the ANC, and you characterized just an aspect of the crisis in the DA for me. And you said that, like, is the DA racist or is it not racist? For me, I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that a lot of the Afrikaans people leaving the ANC, I think that's mischaracterized as conservatives leaving the DA. It's mischaracterized as conservatives joining the Freedom Front Plus. I think that these tensions are generational, and we're not talking about from the advent of the DA in 1999. I think we're talking from the Anglo-Boer War in 1899. I think that a lot of the Afrikaans community have the South Africa carries we carry our history with us through generations, and that extends to white people as well. And to think that white people are a homogenous group, I think, is to oversimplify things. Whereas you have, I think, my feeling is that there's a lot of resentment from Afrikaans people, particularly rural Afrikaans people, towards the WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that, let's say, for example, like your Mike Clarks in Newlands or your young 20-something biscuit mall going hipsters who do all the content marketing for the Democratic Alliance. So I think there's a schism in the DA, and it's a historical schism. And it's not just because the DA dumped Musi, so black people are leaving, and that the DA are tacking between being in the center and being on the right, being conservative and being moderate liberals. That it's confusing, right-wing conservatives. I think there's a real cultural crisis that needs to be managed within the DA, among all the. Remember, it's the Democratic Alliance, so there are lots of cohorts that need to be pulled together in this alliance. And they, just like the ANC, the DA are having to go through multiple crises that are, I think, some of them are existential threats to the Democratic Alliance. And we've seen in the elections where a usually reliable colored base that would mitigate those tensions, where electoral victory would ease over paper over all of the cracks within that alliance. You have losing support in the Patriotic Alliance in Gauteng and the Cape Colored Congress in the Cape Flats, and to good in some of the places in Cape Town. So it's going to be, the outcomes are going to be very interesting, and how the DA manages the tensions within its own internal alliance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think interesting what you say, and you're quite right. I mean, it's amazing thinking about this apartheid thing has always been around ever since I've known it. Because when I came out of school, I was immediately pushed into the army, whether you liked it or not. Or if you went, you were conscripted as a white person into the army, and I was at the time amazed that, hang on a second, now you have an English regiment and you have an Afrikaans regiment. Then we had the Cape Colored Corps, and then we had. It was madness. And we had Indian officers, and they had an Indian corps. And I remember thinking, there's something wrong with this picture. So you're absolutely right about that. I mean, we're not, we are. I mean, the English and the Afrikaners were never really ever got on in many respects. There was always this, we had the Rand Daily Mail and the Burger, and back in the day, and we had English-speaking political parties and so on. So yeah, it's always been a feature of our country, from all the way back when the National Party took over, I suppose. But I want to just touch on something else there, that you talk about the sort of crisis when the DA will look. I don't know that there is. I'm not, as I say, I'm just a member of the DA. I only know what I read, and I certainly don't hear of any crisis per se. It seems to me, if I look around for a crisis, the ANC reigns supreme, where it's on a daily basis. If I look at the other political parties, I don't hear Freedom Front Plus. They seem to be getting along fine with their political ambitions. And the other political parties seem to generally be okay. And I feel the same for the DA. I'm not aware of any anything going on behind the scenes. I think the DA runs extremely well. And certainly if it's a reflection on how well the organization runs, and I've experienced that just in the registration day where I was a voting captain around the corner from here, it's a very well-oiled, smooth machine. So it certainly doesn't reflect a party that's in any kind of chaos. That's the way I guess that's my sort of take on that. But I'd like to just, before we move on, and I'm sure you've got other delicious topics that we can get our teeth into. Where do we sit with the ANC? I want to hear from you, Roscoe. You've obviously been in the ANC for a long time. I don't really know your history. We've never actually ever really discussed it, and we hardly know each other really. But I never joined the ANC, but I understood where the ANC came from, and I understand its history, and I respect that enormously. And I don't think there's many of my friends that don't. But it's gone crazy. We're not going to dwell on that because it's boring. Everybody knows about it. But you're still there. You're still a card-carrying member of the ANC. Where do we go from here? I want to know, what am I missing? And why would I want to join the ANC, a party that has, quite frankly, shown itself to be a party that will shoot its own people? I mentioned Marikana in my tweet, but I meant it. Esidimeni, that was an appalling affair where these 140-odd people died in the most awful circumstances. The beating of Colin Koza and Achitsaga go on, yet you're still there. And at some stage or other, there's a line in the sand. Surely you're going to draw. Where is that line? Or do you not have that line? Do you believe in the principles of the party? Tell me why you're there and what am I missing?
Okay. Look, what is an ANC member is a very interesting question. Because on paper, it's an ANC member is somebody who subscribes to the aims and the values of the ANC. And I think the values of the ANC is something that even you subscribe to when you said that when you voted for the Democratic Breakthrough, a better life for all. It's one of the iconic posters, one of the images of the democratic times. At Mandela's face, you can even now imagine it, a better life for all, the people's president, that was at the bottom. And it's like the ANC still aims to create a united, non-racial, democratic society. That's still the stated aim of the organization, to uplift the poor, to eradicate poverty, to reduce inequality. And that's something that the DA signs up for, because the DA has signed on to the National Development Plan, which has those aims, the eradication of poverty and reduction of inequality by the year 2030. So in a way, it's like anything, it's a lot more complicated than that. The devil is obviously in the details. And that's where I think the DA and the ANC and other political parties would diverge is in the Freedom Charter and the tenets of the Freedom Charter, where we say, look, there has to be some kind of reckoning with the history when it comes to land dispossession, when it comes to things like having a share in the country's wealth. And whereas now we do live in a society where all are theoretically equal before the law, you and I both know that, the more money that you have, you can kick things into touch, you can play legal shenanigans, you can Stalingrad your way in a way that a poor person just simply cannot, enjoying equal human rights. You touched on that when it comes to Marikana, the Marikana massacre. And I make no bones about the fact that I was one of the people who looked at that and said, this is wrong. In fact, there was, in 2016, I took part in a one-person protest against, in the commemoration of all the lives that were lost in Marikana. I did that at great political cost to myself. So I know the cost of standing up and doing the right thing. And I can't keep my back shut about things, So, what is an ANC member? I think that's something that ANC members have to reflect on, because when you asked that for me, that made me reflect, and I think that's a worthwhile question. What do we stand for individually and collectively as an organization? And are we still on track to
mm,
achieving
mm,
a just, a
mm,
non-racial,
mm,
equitable society?
mm, mm. Indeed. I mean, I respect what you're saying, and I understand that entirely. And the goals, yeah, I think universal to anybody, any right-thinking South African would want everything that the ANC wants. My concern is that the ANC is not delivering. It's failed on those principles, um, and it's not producing the kind of leadership that looks like it's going to go back to it. And I think I understand when you say that you went on political risk, because the tragedy of that is that you should actually have been supported when you went out and said what you did, because the ANC has admitted that it is a massacre, and they've not shied away from that fact. They've been honest enough to admit that, but it took a long time for them to do that. And we're quite offended when I used the word massacre once or twice on the radio. They took strong exception to it. Well, the radio that presented it. But that's what it is. And it's a pity that, that people like you are not respected for standing up and saying, look, this is not right. I'm not going to go with the party line. I'm going to stand firm and say it's wrong, that you didn't get the support you did. And that concerns me greatly, is that...
I mean, I'm respected. I am respected, but I'm
No,
respected
sure.
in whispers. People who are
Yeah,
dissidents or
yeah.
generally kind of. But look, I want this. This brings us onto a topic that I think is very important. When we say that, look, the ANC is failing and the DA is failing. Let's just say, for example, the ANC is failing. We've had there's this delusion that the ANC will split and will fail, and this new magical thing will take its place, and everything will be fine, and the economy will grow 10% per annum, and everything will be great. But if you look at the failure of the manifestation of the failure of the ANC, you have riots and looting and massacres. What's happened in what was characterized as the Zuma riots. They weren't necessarily the Zuma riots, although that may have been one of the sparks of that. The point is that we have, I think, 17 million people in the schooling system. The vast majority of those, that generation is going to be unemployed and unemployable because of the
Correct.
quality of education that we're giving them. So what do you do when you come out of school? What is you see the posters on the lamppost, and you see the guys in Gucci suits on TV, ministers and MECs and so on, saying all these wonderful things, but your lived reality is completely different. It's like you're watching a TV show, whereas your real life is the grind and the reality of poverty, and not knowing where you're going to get 10 Rand to buy something to eat. You know? So the ANC won't just disappear, and something else won't just magically take its place. I think it's important for the ANC to renew itself, but also for the body politic to renew itself. And something for my theory is that we lost each other along the way. The ANC and the DA, whatever color T-shirt that you're wearing, we've stopped talking to each other, and that's been to the detriment of our future. I think we really need to we need to retrace our steps and go back to where things went wrong. And if you look at how the DA is being eaten away by smaller parties, and how the ANC is being eaten away by smaller parties, and the EFF and the DA and so on and so forth, it's not inconceivable that within the next two presidential election cycles, we're going to have to seriously consider a government of national unity. That's one of the scenarios. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think well, I think it's maybe not so magical. I think the force of circumstances is going to bring that about. And I really hope sooner rather than later, because I think the longer it's left, the more violent it could turn out to be. Unfortunately, I think that the ANC has kind of moved so far away, though, from reality. And I'll give you a quick example. They've become ideologically driven, and we've got expropriation without compensation. Now, if you want a job killer, that's it. And I mentioned to you when we first met that, I was in Hamburg. I bought out a developer builder from Germany, a Texan, but resides in Germany. And he offered to come here to buy some land that I could broker to him. He was going to invest a small 200 million, not a lot of money by this company's funds, but it was a small investment. But he saw great future in it, and it would have created a minimum of 200 jobs. There was an irony to this, because when I met him, I had no idea when he said he was a Texan living in Germany that it would turn out to be a man of color. And he was, in fact, a black guy. He'd been in Texas all his life, moved to Germany because his mom was transferred there. She married a German. She was a gynecologist living in Berlin. And that's where he set up his business. And he's been very successful. But sadly, when he came to South Africa, he was turned down. The government policy of expropriation without compensation ruined his opportunities. He presented the draft document to me. I had to go through it with him. And I went and ticked off BEE, expropriation without compensation, NHI, and the unions and corruption. But the biggest stumbling block I had was expropriation without compensation. Now, his company that he represents of thousands of investors policy is that you're not going to buy into any company where you can't own your asset. So I contacted and was in touch with the ANC, and the late Jackson and Tembu was involved, and frankly just gave me the finger, because ideologically it didn't suit him. Yet he'd been on the radio often saying, we've rolled up our sleeves, we're open for business. So until such time as the ANC deals with that issue and actually accepts the fact that we either are a free market economy or we're going to be some sort of socialist kind of Cuban thing, we need to resolve that issue first, because at the moment we're in a no man's land. And I think the ANC is just now no longer in touch with reality. We had just touched on people leaving the country, skills are flowing out, money is pouring out. I heard the other day, billionaires are leaving in their droves. So we are really hollowing out all the assets of people, skills, and money that this country had or had very quickly. And ideologically, the ANC seems incapable of making that decision. It's almost trapped. It's trapped in NHI, which they can't run one hospital. Why on earth would we want them to run an entire medical system? They want to run municipalities, but they can't even run Lutfriedi House. And now they want to run the country. Nothing that they do makes any sense. But unfortunately, they have a core of people that will support them come hell or high water. And that's what we've got to hopefully pray that will be peaceably settled. But I can't foresee any other way around it, quite frankly, because until we get our ideology right and we agree that we are either a socialist country or a capitalist or some sort of mix in between, it's not impossible. But we cannot have big business treated like the enemy, or even for that matter, small business. Because I was never treated well, by the way, and I employed 170 people. Every single day was a nightmare for me with all the people that I had. And by the way, my biggest enemy was the unions, because they also are ideologically driven. They saw me as the white boss. Yet, ironically enough, the one union congratulated me on being one of the best run factories in the Western Cape, and in fact paid the best salaries and had the best kind of overall, whatever, I can't remember the word. So I wasn't a bad guy, but it was very, very difficult. And one day I just sold the business simply because I could no longer take the stress and strain. So we need to get all these things right. And the ANC is not doing any of that. They are doing all the wrong signals all the time. And I think it's very much a case of, well, unfortunately, I can only quote our president, and that's when he said, I'd rather be a weak president than break up the ANC. Well, the ANC is simply just a party. It's nothing special. After the war, Winston Churchill, who fought on the conservative side, won the Battle of Britain, or won England. England won the war. He was promptly voted out, and a Labour prime minister was put in, simply because this is not, oh, we love you so much, we're going to keep you in power because we think you're a nice guy. No, we want the best man for the job, and he was promptly voted out, and that's the way it should work. But unfortunately, we have this love of the ANC, which I totally get, but they're no good at running a country. They need to be voted out. Maybe, as Thabo Mbeki said, let them sit in the wilderness for a while, get their act together and come back. But at the moment, we need to find out what we are, and we don't know. So we're going round and round in small circles.
Well, I don't think I understand what you're saying about corruption and things like that. My view is that we should be like the Chinese, where if there's corruption in China, you go to jail. There are special corruption courts. You go there and you dealt with, and you not allowed to hold public office anymore. The jails that they have there are like sort of like massive Formula One hotels. So you go there, expelled from the Central Communist Party, you're there for life, and that's the end of your political career. I would totally back the creation of corruption, special courts that deal with corruption, public sector and private sector. I want to see Marcus Jooste there as well, next to all
absolutely.
of these guys, you know.
Yes, indeed.
And we, you know, like, so you said something about NHI and expropriation of land by compensation and things like that. I don't think these are ideological issues. I think these are issues born of wanting to redress history. And when it comes to things like Black economic empowerment, I like to believe that was a good faith, but ultimately ham-fisted attempt to redress history. Whereas we have the same situation now as in the political economy of post-democratic South Africa, as the political economy of apartheid South Africa, where there's a thin sliver of millionaires and billionaires, some of whom are now Black, that entrench inequality and poverty, and whatever works for them and their companies and their businesses, they are now have another lever to hold over the economy, and that is Black economic empowerment. And you're a businessman, you know it's a matter of ticking some boxes, finding the right partners. All of a sudden, you go from a millionaire to a multimillionaire, or multimillionaire to a billionaire. And I think that BEE seriously needs to be addressed. All of these issues that you bring up, I don't have an objection with. We need to look at that. We need to go in with a fine-tooth comb and examine whether they're working. But what I do take issue with is the characterization of an ANC as some monolithic ideological machine that and that the DA is not, because the DA is an ideological machine. It has many different guises. When we say freedom, fairness, opportunity in the DA, freedom for who? For people who have the money. Fairness for who? For business. Opportunity for who? For people who have capital. So there may be some things that trickle down to the working class, but ultimately it's not. They're not really doing the best job for people in, let's say, for example, Blikkiesdorp or Wolverine. We still have, in many ways, where the ANC recreates some of the worst failings of the apartheid government, the DA also continues to entrench the structural apartheid of the apartheid regime. So we have to have a serious dialogue. We need to go back to the drawing board on many of these things. Unions, I think that Solidariteit are also a union, even though we disagree on things like our version of history and what we want. They still care about the welfare of the workers. So why shouldn't they have a seat at the table that all unions have? You know, they're building a university for Afrikaans people. Okay, great. That's a great idea. Why can't they build one for Black people as well, for colored Afrikaans people? Why can't they do that? Because then they will create a whole lot of goodwill. So we need to start, really, Mike, I appreciate you talking to me, because I think that people need to have these dialogues, and they need to have these debates, and they need to kind of say, like, if you say something against the ANC, I'm not going to take it personally. And I've shot a couple of my best shots against the DA, and you don't take it personally.
Not at all.
We need to have a serious dialogue about what do we want, where do we want to go in 20 years' time? Because otherwise the crisis is going to accelerate, and the riots that we've just come out of, the looting and the unrest, it's going to be an annual event. It's going to be like the carnival.
An annual event, as you say.
It's Lootapalooza.
I think just on this topic, My overall comment would be, well, first of all, in terms of China, I think that's a bit extreme. I'm not a big fan of China, but because they're not a democracy, we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. So I would hate to be a Chinese person who falls foul of the government, because there'll be nobody there to speak up for you. But be that as it may, I think what needs to be fixed, or it's actually quite easy to fix what's wrong in our country. And if you look back on it, one of our problems is law and order. We had the scorpions, and they've been removed. And the consequences of that are quite clear. I know a lot of people say, the scorpions went for the big guys, and they should have gone for business and whatever. But the fact of the matter is they were an independent policing body, and they reported to no one. And so they had the respect of everybody. And you knew if you got caught by the scorpions, you were in trouble. Doesn't matter whether you're in business or in politics. So we've lost that ability. We need to reinstate the scorpions so we have an independent policing authority, so everybody knows that when the scorpions come after you, there's nobody to turn to at the moment. If you're a politician in the ANC, particularly, well, only in the ANC, you laugh at the hawks. I mean, because they report to the Minister of Justice, and the Minister of Justice reports to the President. In terms of the hospitals and NHI is quite doable. We kind of almost had it, because ironically enough, under apartheid, we had very well-run hospitals. In fact, world-famous hospitals. Chris Barnard and Red Cross was famous for looking after children from all over Africa. Sure, it was under apartheid, but they were run, and all the ANC had to do was take that system, that NHI we had, and just grow it. But they needed to turn it on its head for some strange reason and destroy what worked really quite well, and try and enforce what is now, I don't know, and then get rid of private healthcare. Well, leave private healthcare alone. It doesn't cost anybody any money. It's not making the poor any poorer. And if anything, it's saving the government money, because they're not having to worry about me as a patient, because I'm quite happy to spend 3,000 or 4,000 rand a month or whatever it is for my wife and I to be on this fund. But apparently for the ANC, this is no good. And so we need to correct that sort of thing. And then finally, the schooling. We had a good system in this country. I'm not advocating apartheid schooling by any means, but we generally had a good system. And the ANC seemed to take that and turn that on its head. And we need to get back to that. I noticed with interest, when I started as a career as a pilot for a long time ago, back in 1983, that all the pilots that were training there were not from South Africa, the black pilots. They were from Africa in the training school that I was in. And I was saddened to see that when I went back there about 4 years ago, still lots of black pilots being trained, but not South African black pilots. And then I found out the Southern and black pilots that were being trained, where they went to private and Model C schools, because our schooling system is not producing the quality of person that can become a pilot or become a businessman or become a dentist or a doctor. And I hear it so often when I hear a success story or books come out, invariably you'll find that person has gone through a Model C or a private school, simply because our education system is upside down. So that's just, these simple things really can be corrected quite easily. But I go back to the ideology. The ANC's ideology is no, we will all have one healthcare system. No, we will all have one schooling system, and they will outlaw private schools if they're half a chance, and they'll probably have a good go at it soon. And no, everybody must report to the state, and the state will own all the land. End of story. That is the ideology that the ANC has got, and it's proved, and that's the ideology that is going to bring this country, in my humble opinion, to its knees, if not already. I mean, we're there now with massive unemployment.
Look, I hear what you're saying, but that's not entirely true, because I'm not an ideologue that blindly follows the party line. I think there's a lot of space in the ANC to, as I said before, to debate things, and I think dissent is generally respected in the ANC. You kind of have to do it in the right way and through the right channels, but you can't dissent in the EFF. You can't dissent in the DA. I think there's a lot more, because it's a bigger organization, because there are a lot more gears and levers. It has to accommodate a lot more congregants in the broad church that is trying to build. Now, whether it can cohere through the future, how dissent is taken on board, and how other ideas are taken on and brought into the mainstream of the policy thinking, I think we've already had an example of that. We've seen Ramaphosa go above his the Minister of Energy really unleash sustainable renewable energy sector in terms of the amount of energy that's put into the grid by independent power producers. So, I think the ANC, or at least Cyril Ramaphosa, has shown that his presidency can be responsive to dissent. I don't think that I've seen that from the DA. I think I've seen some of it from Alan Winde under harsh pressure. I think he's doing a reasonable job of containing somebody like Debbie Schaefer. But by and large, in the DA, it's the DA can do no wrong. Like yesterday with the water crisis in Nelson Mandela Bay, they went full on. Somebody sabotaged the bolt in Kuburg. Who's that guy? Remember the guy that said this?
Yes.
Yeah. What's his name? And anyways, the DA claims sabotage because it can't just be about their failure. It has the DA government. So there must be something that some outside force that made something go. There must be some kind of sabotage at play when some things go wrong in the DA. But by and large, like I'm very much now in the political space where I've been a cheerleader, I've been on the field, I've been like someone who's followed the party line blindly, and I've seen that this way is not the way forward in South Africa. We have to talk to other people. We have to but we have to find the win-win to building a better future. The ANC is not going to have things its own way, and neither is the EFF, and neither is the DA. So cool. We'll put on a show for the people. We will release our press statements and we'll posture. But what's going to happen behind the scenes? What can we work behind the scenes to reach some sort of consensus on, like issues like affirmative action and Black economic empowerment? Can we, in terms of social cohesion, can we start talking to each other in rooms? Can we get out of our Twitter bubble? Can we actually ask ourselves, can we introspect, so that, for me, that's the space that I'm in. So anytime I hear that the ANC characterized as a monolithic block of ideologues, I say, like, no, I'm an ANC member. You are my neighbor. Mike Clark is my, I told him to F off on Twitter, but he's my friend. I have fierce disagreements with a comrade about X, Y, and Z, but at the end of the day, I will have a braai and a beer with him, no problem. And I think that's the space we need to move into. We need to take Twitter out of our daily discourse, leave the Twitter things for Twitter, and start to talk to each other.
Well, I think, Roscoe, you're right about everything, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think that your platform that you have here now is a great opportunity. I really hope that, and I will spread the word, but we need to have more of this, because this is one of the rare opportunities, and for me to talk to somebody from the other side. The last time I spoke to an ANC supporter was, ironically enough, at the registration weekend where I met Amanda Ayanda and her husband, two of the nicest people. We had a great time. We had a long political conversation, and it was great to meet them. And I'm looking forward to meeting them again on election day, and hopefully even socializing with them, because it was just nice to talk, because we live in our bubbles, as you rightly say. And this Twitter is terrible in that respect, because all we do is insult each other, because we've only got so many characters in which to do it, and because there's no time for debate. And I think, it's that old story, George instead of war, and I think that's what we need more of. But I can't always stop. I always have to, unfortunately, end up criticizing the ANC again, because I don't really want to, but the ANC really is playing this race thing to the nth degree. And one of the bugbears I've got is that the race card is played on a regular basis. And I, just as a South African, am always amazed on a daily basis about the goodwill that goes on. The guys that came to collect my rubbish this morning, how's the driver? Chat to him. One guy was ill. We have a chat. I go, wherever I go, there's a new shop that's open that specializes in Apple computers. I don't know where they come from, but there's no white people there, which is not of an issue to me, but it's a new business. And I was happy to be there to support it. And they were so fantastic in the service they gave me. And it was just one of those days. I go, wherever I go, there's goodwill. And I think that the ANC crushes that goodwill because they need to play the race card. It's the only card they've got left. And I honestly will go to my grave arguing that 99% of South Africans get along with everybody just fine. And I just think that that is something. Well, I can't fight it, but you're in the ANC. That needs to be addressed. I think the ANC has got to, if nothing else, acknowledge the fact that we actually we all get on very well. Thank you very much. But yeah, this race card is the biggest, for me, the biggest issue. And I think that's the one thing that it does, by the way, very successfully split the race groups very, very evenly down the middle. And of course, that works for the ANC because they need to, what's the word, go down together. They need to have a common enemy. That's, I suppose. And of course, white people are perfect because, hey, white people didn't do them any favors for the last 30, 40 years or whatever years you want to attach to it. So sure, do it. But unfortunately, the country is going to suffer because of that. Because sure, you can do that, but you're not building the country. We're not growing. There's no jobs, as you touched on earlier. Kids are coming out of school. It breaks my heart. I go to UCT, and I was an adjudicator there for some years. The third year students and going into small business on the business science degree there, and I would sit and listen, and it was fantastic to hear the ideas. But they're doing it in a narrow economy. They're leaving university with all this knowledge, all this enthusiasm into a market with nowhere to go. There's no additional money. Sure, they'll open up a business. They've got a great idea, but who's going to support it? Not me, because I don't really have any spare cash. The economy is not moving. And it's just this big thing now. Why is the economy? Well, we go back again to, in my opinion, the ideology. We're frightening away overseas investment. Growth's not coming in. If anything, it's flying out the country. And that's the cycle that I believe, as personally, my clock, not as a DA, but just my view on the economy as to where we are. If we don't break that cycle, we're never going to, and as I say, we're never going to get anywhere, and we're going to have record unemployment. 3 out of 4 students these days, or unemployed amongst something like that. It's just horrendous. I don't know how.
75% of under 35.
75%. What do they do when they wake up in the morning? I mean, it's the most depressing thought. I just don't know. And it can't, they're not going to sit there forever. I mean, something has got to give.
Yeah.
And I like your idea that you said behind the scenes. Well, you never know. Maybe behind the scenes something is going on. We knew when the National Party, eventually it sunk into their heads that they're not going to win this war. Because people like me, and I was supposed to be a white guy on their side because I'm white. Nonsense. There were many of us. Cameron Dugmore was one of them. I remember he was on the end conscription campaign. Not that I can remember him there, but I remember that name very, very well. So the government had it realized that, I'm talking about the National Party, realized, hey, we can't keep the ship afloat any longer. We better do something. And the behind the scenes negotiations started. Who knows? Maybe something's going on behind the scenes. I have no idea, but I certainly hope if it isn't, that it starts fairly soon. And some people in the ANC and the DA wake up to the fact that we need to start talking more and come up with something different.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, where we are at the moment is, I agree with you. We can go back to the basics and stuff, but what are the basics? The basics we've got to agree on. And I think that one of the basics is not expropriation without compensation. That's just not. There are other ways to solve that problem. Definitely other ways. But no, expropriation without compensation is definitely not one of those. My take on it.
At the heart of the matter, what you said that sort of made me a little bit also was that you said that the ANC plays the race card, and that so what that makes you feel like. I have to acknowledge that from my lens, maybe it's not true, but that's the way that you feel. And
sure,
my personal perspective on white racism or the ANC playing the race card against white people, whatever they. If I could wring an apology out of a white person for apartheid and colonialism, and I knew that apology would immediately cause 10,000 houses to be built, I would be doing that every single day. But that's not what it's going to be. I don't think that white people should apologize for racism and apartheid unless they are racist, unless they were apartheid agents, unless they were agents of colonialism. And that's like 0.5% of white people. I truly agree that the 99.999% of white people, conservative, Afrikaans, English, whatever, are not racist, we're not apartheid, etc. You know, so wringing an apology out of white people or parlaying white guilt into some kind of Twitter victory, it does nothing for society. But what we do have to do, we do have to acknowledge that we have to use the instruments available to us as a government, as politicians, as civil society, as individuals, to redress the wrongs of the past that were not necessarily committed by white people who are alive today, but were committed in the past by colonialism, etc., etc. So how can we socially cohere as South African society to uplift everybody? And that's my project at the moment, to try and build something that, like I don't want Steve Hoffman to apologize for the Voortrekkers doing X, Y, and Z. I don't care. I know that it's a fact of history, but how are we going to deliver services, water? How are we going to build the economy to deliver employment, reduce inequality and poverty? That's the thing that we should focus on. And I think that we were so close to getting it right. And the building block of that was that feel-good social coherence. It may have been a little bit over the top. It may have been a little bit wishful thinking, but the Rainbow Nation, before it became a cliche and a marketing phrase, it wasn't ideal. It was something that felt good. We felt good about it. It made us feel good as a society, as a culture. We wanted to move forward. And we've got to get that feel-good factor back again. Yeah. When we interact with each other, we need to, I don't want you to feel like that, Mike. I don't want you to feel that you isolated from society. I want you to be part of it. I want black people, colored people, white people, Indian people, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, atheists, whatever, to be part of building the society. But we also have to acknowledge, most importantly, that it's mainly non-white people who are increasingly being pauperized. I think that all poor people should be uplifted. And that includes poor white people, includes poor white Afrikaans people. All poor people should be given a chance. We should build the economy for everybody. And it starts with a social coherence. Yeah.
I think it starts with that, and it starts with good education. I mean, at the end of the day, that is the gift that every parent tries to give to its offspring, is to give it a good education. I know people, it's human nature. You all work day and night to make sure your child gets the best education that you can afford. And that's what we need to do as a country. We need to get the education out there. We can't go around giving everybody some money because there simply isn't enough. But if we give them a good education, that I think that's the building block to my mind. And I love what you said about the fact that we were so close. I agree with you. We were so close at that one time. And I remember waiting for a backlash from the right-wing Afrikaners and, all these stories you hear about, I don't know, Afrikaans secret hideouts and heaven knows what else. Well, they all just faded away because Nelson Mandela came out. He said, listen, chill, everybody. We're going to get along. And everybody said, hey, great. You know what? At the end of the day, all I want to do is go to work, bring up my kids, and live a peaceful life. And we had it for that wonderful period under Nelson Mandela, where it really was like that. And it was wonderful to brag. It was wonderful to travel overseas. And I got onto a tourist bus and they said to me, oh, where are you from? I said, South Africa. Everybody clapped. It was quite emotional, but that's where we were. There was that wonderful time. They didn't clap because I was white. They clapped, obviously, because I'm South African. And we had pulled off an unbelievable feat, but it was through one guy, Nelson Mandela. And we had it, as you say, we were so tantalizingly close. And sadly, we have drifted away from it. But yeah. So I think education really is where it starts, and we've got to get that right. I think that's right. That's the thing we've got. That's
so the Mandela presidency. I want to wrap up soon. I'll give you the last word, but mine is that the Mandela presidency was the honeymoon. Then we came back. We were in a marriage. Things are going wrong, and now we're on the verge of serving divorce papers unless we get some counseling we need to go into marriage counseling as a society.
In a hurry.
That's where we're at now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a wonderful analogy. That's exactly what it was. I mean, it was wonderful. And when we won the rugby, and I mean, the goodwill, I mean, it didn't matter. I mean, you could go anywhere and, people were happy. There was just that. So, yeah, I hear that analogy. I think you're absolutely right. That's where we are. Our marriage is falling apart. We do need some counseling. And I think we also need, we need to take a reality check. Maybe as a political parties, they need to actually step back and say, okay, hang on a second, maybe let's halt this in your face Twitter wars you referred to. And maybe actually you better step back and say, you know what, guys, let's just go and have a beer or a cup of tea and let's sit down and have a chat here. Maybe that's actually what it's all about, is to actually stop slinging insults across parliament benches and, this sort of thing, is actually just to sit down and talk about it. I believe that most parties would want that. And hopefully so would the ANC.
Absolutely.
And, that would work for me. If that really, I think would be a wonderful thing to come about. So who knows, that's somehow or other, maybe our conversation will spark something somewhere and somebody will be listening to what we're talking about as ANC, DA, and maybe that will spark that very necessary conversation, because I'm dreading the divorce, sir. I really am.
Yeah. Who gets the kids? AKA the EFF.
Who gets the kids? Exactly.
Yeah. You guys get the EFF Monday to Friday. We'll have them every second weekend. But you have to pay maintenance for the Cape Coloured Collective.
Oh yes,
very, very high maintenance.
High maintenance.
It's actually mainly your fault, actually, and yeah.
Well, let's see. Maybe we'll get on. Maybe they'll come onto your wonderful platform and tell us otherwise. Let's see.
Hopefully. Michael, thank you for talking. We promised a debate. We under-delivered. We had a conversation instead. So, yeah.
No, that's good. I don't think we under-delivered at all. I think we broke the ice. I'd love to chat more to you. And I look forward to more of your listeners and viewers, rather, getting involved. I hope there's a good response. And I hope that we'll get other political parties, just members, just ordinary members such as myself, to come on and let's listen to. I'd love to hear from the EFF on a one-on-one, or from the ACDP and all these other parties. I don't know what they think. I have no idea. I see their boards and that's all. I want to hear what's inside their head. And that would be a wonderful, I think, platform that, quite frankly, is sorely needed in our country.
Yeah. Just one last thing. I want you to rate the three major political parties posted on a scale of 1 to 10. The Democratic Alliance, what do you like, what do you don't like? Scale of 1 to 10.
You want me to give you a number?
Yeah, and some thoughts.
Oh, yeah. I'll give them a 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you like? What don't you like?
I do like the fact that they understand economics. They understand how business operates.
No, the posters, just the posters, the election posters.
Oh, you're talking about the posters?
Yeah.
What do I like about the posters?
Yeah.
No, I think. Yeah. Sorry, I think the message is nice. I think we get things done. I think that's a great byline, a nice, catchy line, and I think they live up to that. I think people can't argue with the fact wherever the DA does govern, they do govern well. Sure, they got their faults, but by and large, as it goes against, to compare them, and really it's only the ANC that we can compare to, they are definitely, without doubt, as the Auditor General says, they run 26 or best municipalities.
Just the posters, just the thing that you drive past, man. Come on. Yeah. So yeah, okay. I like the Cape Town works, let's do more. It's got a cadence, a rhythm. It speaks, it already tailors to an audience. It's like what it says is what we have is what we're going to hold. So like a Mike in Newlands will see that and say, Cape Town works, let's do more. That kind of thing. Have you seen the good posters?
I actually, be honest, I haven't. I know they are up, but I actually haven't seen one. So no, I can't really comment. I don't even know what their line is, and maybe you can tell me. I have no idea. But I haven't seen.
They're really nice, actually. There are a couple of posters that are iconic for me. The first one we spoke a bit about it, the Nelson Mandela election poster from 1994. Mandela for President, A Better Life for All, and his face was the first time. It's iconography, actually. First time we saw his face as not a terrorist, not the young man who went into prison, but just this warm, open, wise, welcoming face. The second one, iconic for a completely different reason. The Tony Leon Fight Back poster, where Tony Leon's folding his arms like that. It's like fight back. 2 words. They got some American consultants in on that one. Simple message that sort of galvanized that campaign, and that post is emblematic of what the DA has actually become over the last 21 years, actually. And then I think in the third one is the current good poster. What they've done is very clever. They're not portrait, they're landscape. So in the way it's like most posters are 4x3, they've gone like a 16x9, like shifted the perspective. So you have Brett Herron on the one poster and Patricia Dill on the other. They've got the boxing gloves, and the message is on the left hand side of the image, and but there are 2 halves. So from a design element, works well. The orange works well. The catchphrase is "Make your hood good" or something like that, which works well. And just going landscape, it works really well. Yeah, it's good. Keep an eye for that. And we wait for the ANC posters. We
wait for the ANC posters, and I don't know when they're going to come out. I mean, they're always late though.
Yeah.
But that's their tradition. That's the way they've always operated.
Yeah, late impact.
Late impact
substitute. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Normally they come in, as the old expression goes, hot and heavy. Let's see. Actually, I don't think they're going to come in so hot and heavy this year. So I think it's going to be a bit of light whimper, but we'll see.
We'll see.